Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you for joining us again for the Data Park User Conference 2020. Today, we're going to start what is traditionally our third day of the user conference, where we do some training sessions. So normally, if you are all physically here with us, this is when we rearrange the room, line you all up to make it look like a classroom, and then the Data Park engineers spend a little time hopefully teaching you a little bit more about the Parkview software and things that you can do with it. So today we're going to have 4 sessions, and tomorrow we're going to have 4 more. And they're going to be done by our Data Park engineers or the implementation engineers. And we're very proud of that group and all the skills and all the hard work they do. For those of you who don't know, all of our engineers are chemical engineers. And we've always find it very useful to have those in that role because we think it's the most important thing they can provide you is the ability to understand or try to understand your process. Many of our users are chemical engineers and operators and deep in the process. So we found it best to get the chemical engineers in there because they have a little bit more passion about the process and what we're all doing in industry. And even though they may not know as much about your industry, of course, as you do, they're lined up and ready to start learning it. Now, we also ask them to troubleshoot firewalls and DCOM security and Active Directory and firewall ports and network issues and databases and REST APIs and database maintenance and interface to those. So we asked them to wear a lot of hats. But I do think the most important one they wear is a fellow process person that can understand and begin to get your process. And hopefully that shows through with their ability to listen to your requests, to have a shared discussion with you and about utilizing the Data Park software. And another key role of our engineers is they work very close with our development group as what's in the agile world called product owners. And so as we develop Data Park further and Parkview, they are one of the key inputs on how it should look, how it should function, how it should feel, because they're the ones out there just like you that are using the software and are trying to do their jobs with the tools we provide it. So every user conference we ask 8 or 9 of them. I'm one of them. You'll see me tomorrow presenting as well. To put together some examples of ways that they know they and other customers, other people are using the Data Park software in real life applications, and hopefully come across with some useful information and techniques that people can use, hopefully use right away. So today we're going to have Adam Cooper. He's going to do some new features in our Run browser. We touched upon those in some of our development talks last week. We're going to have Nick Iverson do identifying and using golden runs or selected runs in Centerline and other tools. So when you identify a good period of time, possibly using the features that Adam's going to show you, how can you pull that back up again and make it visible and useful in Data Park? Nick Eimers will join at just before 10 o'clock today, and he'll be talking about using our Park Task tool to trigger workflows directly from alarms. So that's a new feature that we added. So alarms can reach out and schedule a workflow. So it means an alarm could generate a report and send an email or trigger some other event in the system. And last, we'll have Neil McGee, who will show a little bit more about the Parkview deviation detection tool that we had. Some people may have seen at the last user conference, but he'll kind of dive in and get into setup and use as more kind of a desktop user or desktop jockey. So again, let me just kind of kick off an introduction for the first session with Adam Cooper. Adam Cooper started with Capstone a number of years ago, directly out of college, where he worked as an implementation engineer for many years out in the field doing training like this, installs, special projects, environmental projects, costing, KPIs, and a lot of work in that. He also supported a number of our foreign customers overseas for a number of years, and then he accepted and moved in position as our lead technical sales engineer, where now he's helping our salespeople and area managers at introducing new customers to DataPark and making sure their needs are filled. So he's going to be going over some new features that we've added to the Run browser. And they're barely released or going to be released very, very soon. So it's a bit of a preview features, and the features that are available in version 7 of DataPark to help people and users find runs and search a little deeper into your data to find that information that you need for analysis. And in the chat, we posted a link. Traditionally, we always make a handout that we usually are very happy to hand directly to everybody who's joined us. But this year, you have to grab it virtually. If you have any trouble with that link, please send a message or a quick email, and somebody can send you or email you the PDF that has the kind of follow-along guide to all these sessions. So everybody, please sit back and enjoy Adam's presentation on the new Run browser features, and I'll see you all soon, where I'll join again, and Adam and I will be available for a little question and answer. So thank you and enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DataPark User Conference. I'm glad you guys could join us. Today, we're going to be talking about some improvements we've made to Run browser in the upcoming version 7.1, some different ways to slice and dice the data. So yeah, it should be some interesting stuff. My name is Adam Cooper. For those of you that don't know, I've been with the company for a bit over a decade now. Started in the implementation group, so helping to set up DataPark around the world. And now I work with the sales team, helping to make sure that we give the best information and are able to get out there and spread the word. So before I dive into the actual improvements, I wanted to just take a moment to kind of explain why I think this is really useful by relating to something that I've been doing recently. So I've been picking up running for the past couple of months. And I use an app to track my pace, and it gives me information like the total time, the pace for my segment, and then the overall pace. So I have an idea of whether or not I'm improving run to run. I live in an urban area, so one of the things that I encounter on my runs are stoplights, where I have to stop and wait for traffic in order to continue. And being the engineer that I am, I kind of realized, oh, stopping at these stoplights was probably affecting my overall time. And that didn't seem very fair to me. It wasn't that I was running slower. It was that the lights were stopping me. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be really nice if I could remove the data where I'm stopped to give myself better averages and, yeah, kind of improve my time a little bit. And I thought back, as I do, how does this relate to DataPark? And this was, I thought this would be a really useful feature in Run browser. And lo and behold, we were already working on it. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight to why I think these features that we're going to talk about in a little bit are really useful. Run browser is a really powerful tool for being able to see your data in various runs. But this is going to give you more power to be able to kind of slice and dice, pick and choose the data, filter, divide, and be able to get at the exact data that you want in order to make better decisions about your process and troubleshoot any issues that come up. So here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk, just mention really briefly how Run browser works currently. So just a quick little demo of that. Then we're going to take a look at the new Run browser for version 7. It's got a bit of a different look, and I'll kind of highlight some of the options there. We're going to give an overview of the new criteria function. So the criteria is kind of how we're able to slice and dice. And then I'll do some video demos that kind of show how that works in action with your data. Next, we're going to talk about saving and loading Run browser configuration to the database. That's a new feature as well. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with a few other kind of miscellaneous features that are also going to be available that will give you some better insights into your data as well. So first, let's just talk a little bit about current Run Browser. So Run Browser currently is compatible with most ParkView displays. And what it does is, with things like Trend or other displays, allows you to look at multiple runs or time spans in a single display. So instead of looking at one time span, you can look at multiples. Those runs could be defined based on grade, so what type of thing are you making? It could be based off of product codes, like batches or product lots. Or it could be time-based perhaps for like a production day or a week or a month, things that are defined like that. Right now, you can filter which runs you pull back based off of length. So we have like a minimum and a maximum run length filter. And then you can also filter by grade or by specific product numbers if you want to look at individual batch units or other products within that. So here's just a screenshot of our current Run Browser. So just kind of want to point out that there are 6 tabs here. We can see some options here. We see the standard kind of time range, and then we see one here where we're actually looking at a run filter for a specific grade and pulling back grade runs. In this case, we're looking at 5. So that's kind of how Run Browser is right now. And then we also have, as some of you might know, the 2 different modes, consecutive and compare. And so here's just a screenshot of those 2 different modes here in Run Browser. So consecutive is on the top, and that's the idea that we have 5 different runs here, all separated by these yellow lines. Those are run dividers. And so we can see 5 different periods of times, even if there's a gap between them, all in one display, which is really useful. And then below, we have the compare mode. So in this case, there's 3 tags, a blue tag, a green tag, and a purple tag. And we can see multiple product runs or batches for each of those. Those are represented by the different shading of each of those colors. And so it's a pretty powerful tool to be able to take multiple time spans and be able to integrate those into a single display. But now we're going to be able to take that even further. So here's a screenshot of new Run Browser, starting with version 7.1. So a couple things to point out is we've got 2 new buttons up here at the top for being able to save and load configurations from the database, and we're going to demo that a little bit later. There's a new drop-down here for where you want to place the runs grid. And then you'll see here in the body, we're now at 4 tabs. So this Run Filter tab is now doing everything that about 3 tabs were doing before. We have our 3 options for what kind of runs we want to pull back. So instead of being separated over 2 tabs, they're all on the same tab. And then if you do choose process, we have all our same options here for being able to choose what runs we want. There's a new criteria section here, which I'll get to in a little bit. And then, like I said, the runs grid now is in the same window. So you can see, in this case, the run grid is to the right of everything, and that's what this location setting is. And before I click off, I just want to point out that your familiar buttons down here at the bottom, load all, load selected, and clear, those are part of the runs grid as well. And then here we have new Run Browser as well, but I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like if we put the grid on the bottom. So depending on what kind of monitors you have and how much space you have, you're certainly welcome to use either configuration option going forward whenever you're ready to utilize new Run Browser. Okay, so let's talk about the new criteria section. So basically what this allows is for you to take any DataPark tag or tags, you can use more than one, to create criteria for modifying your run data. There's 2 types here. So we have first the filter type, which is the ability to filter out data, for tags on the display, but it leaves the start and the end time of the run intact. So basically what this means is certain data points will be removed from the display, whether it's trend or another, and you'll see some blank spots because you didn't want that data for one reason or another. The other type there is divide. Divide will take your existing runs and divide them even further. So maybe originally you asked for 3, but based on your divide criteria, you'll end up pulling back 10 runs because it's going to sort of further divide those based off of what tag or tags you add and what conditions you set for it. The other thing that we'll see in the new criteria section is a little bit of logic for how to combine those tags. So you're able to use either AND logic or OR logic to combine the tags together. And then there's also the ability to create multiple groups that you can utilize the AND OR logic with to be able to sort of further define your criteria and be able to slice and dice your data as you want. So here's a screenshot of the new criteria section. So you can see I've expanded it out here. Right now I've only got one tag in there, so there's only one group. But you can see that there's a checkbox for enabled. So you could set up your criteria if you want to, and then not enable it to be able to utilize that later, but not necessarily utilize the criteria initially. Says the name of the tag. There's type. So in this case, as we talked about, there's two types right now, type filter and divide. Some operators for what kind of logic we want to do, the value that you want to compare your tag to, and then the AND OR in the group for how to combine multiple tags together in order to achieve your selected criteria function. And then just to kind of expand and elaborate a little further, you can see here that we have all the different operators. So kind of your standard logic ones: equals, does not equal, greater than, less than, and then of course greater than equal to, less than equal to as well. And then unsurprisingly, the two options for AND OR are AND OR. Okay, so now we're going to transition to some live action demos. So first, I just want to show you guys what it looks like right now with Run Browser. So how does Run Browser work in the current ParkView? So how to be able to pull runs without using a filter or without using the divide criteria that we'll talk about, we'll then show later. Then after that, I'll show an example of using filter. We'll do filter for both consecutive and compare mode just to kind of see what those two look like. And then finally, we'll do an example with divide to show you how the new divide type works within the criteria. So first, here's ParkView without the filters. So we're going to go ahead and load Run Browser. I've already got it preloaded. I'm looking at 5 runs with the calendar day. So we'll go ahead, send those runs to the grid just to see what they look like. I like them all. So I go ahead and I add them to the trend here. And you can see here that we have 5 runs, and we're seeing all the data for them. So kind of keep this shot in mind as we move to the next video where we're going to filter out some data, and you'll be able to see the difference between no filters and some filters. Okay, so we're looking at the exact same trend, same data, but now we're going to activate a filter that I set up. So we're going to go ahead, bring in Run Browser. We're going to come here and expand the criteria section. And you can see that I already have a criteria set up for filtering on an uptime tag. I'm just going to go ahead and enable that, activate that within the Run Browser, set up trend the way I want. And what you'll notice is, especially in the middle one, there's some data missing. That was a downtime that we wanted to filter out. So that's kind of the power of these filters, is being able to remove the data that you want from these data sets. So again, just to kind of point out, right here is where that gap is. The other thing that's really useful with this is this filtering will apply to quick statistics through the trend, or any export data that you do. That filtered data will continue to be filtered out as you do an export, making sure that you only get the data that you're expecting. It's kind of making sure that this feature goes throughout, which I think is really useful. All right, so now we're going to take a look at how the filter works for compare mode. So I've got some batch tags here, and I've got my Run Browser set up to show me some product runs. I've enabled some criteria, or I've set up some criteria, but they are not enabled. So initially, we're going to load in 5 batch runs here. And just to kind of show you what that looks like, you can see that there's some of them extend the whole way. They all go, they go to the full duration, all the way to 3+ hours. So now we're going to activate the criteria. So basically, it's between 1 and 1300. we're looking at a reaction rate tag there. So when it's 0, the reaction is dead, and anything above 1300 is done reaction as well. So you can see that we see less data, right? The runs themselves are shorter. They don't take up the full span, although you'll notice the x-axis is more or less intact, which helps to give you an idea of how much data was filtered. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that all of the runs have been adjusted to show them starting at the 0 point. So even if there was some data at the beginning that we were clipping out or filtering out, that data is removed. And so it's nice that it's adjusted like that, and you can kind of get a feel for the duration of the filtered batch run that you do care about. Okay, and now we're going to transition to showing the divide feature. So in this case, we're going to open up Run Browser. Well, it's a pretty common refrain today. And we're looking at 3 day runs. And so that's what we're going to start with. I do have a criteria configured, but we're not going to enable it just yet. You can see I've loaded those 3 runs in the grid. I get 3 24-hour day runs. And then when I add them, we can see those added to the trend there. Now notice in the bottom right trend, there's some breaks there. So that's what we're going to use as our divide criteria. And we're basically going to divide up these runs to only show the times where the process is running. So now I'm going to activate my criteria. So go ahead and check that off. And in this case, we're doing divide. Now you'll notice when I send these runs to the grid has 8 runs there instead of 3. So that's breaking up the 3 24-hour runs into these other runs. And when I activate it, I get all 8 of those. I loaded all of them into the trend. Now you'll notice some of them are smaller than others. Maybe I don't care about the small ones. So I'm going to go ahead and take the ones on the bottom, the 5 ones that are above an hour, and load those on the trend. And now I've got these runs that are all uptime, that are as long as I want, that I've put into the trend so that I have better data for me to be able to do analysis. So it's another more useful way to be able to slice and dice your data and be able to sort of see the data that you want in order to make better decisions and speed up, hopefully, your day. Okay, so now that we've given you all these cool new options, we also thought it would be really useful if you could apply them a lot easier from display to display. So the 2 things that we've given, I kind of mentioned these buttons earlier. There's now a save button, which will allow you to save your whole Run Browser configuration into the database. And you give it a name, give it a description, and then once it's saved, you can go ahead and open up any display that has Run Browser in it, load up that saved configuration, and then all of the settings, all of the criteria, all of that is loaded in and is available for you to use without having to reset every single setting display to display. So it's a really useful way to be able to transfer those settings without too much difficulty. The last thing that we added was security. So each of these saved configurations will have the idea of an owner. That owner could be everyone, where you don't really have any security around it, or you could assign it to a specific user. Like I could save one under my name, and I would be the only one allowed to edit or delete it. But everyone else would be able to use it, but I would still own it and not have to worry about anyone touching it going forward. So let's take a quick look at a demo of being able to save and load in these configurations. So I've got my handy dandy trend here. We're going to go ahead and open up Run Browser. I've got some criteria set. I'm looking at some day runs. So I'm going to go ahead and now save this to the database. I'm going to type in a nice name here. So User Conference 2020 filter. We'll give it a nice description that's useful for people. So we're filtering on an uptime tag, i.e. keeping the data when the process is on or up, if you will. Like I said, there's the notion of the owner. So this is a list where I could choose from the available identities who I want the owner to be. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to leave it with everyone. So now that I've saved it, that is in the database and available for use elsewhere. I'm going to close this tag, go back to ParkView here real quick, and I'm going to load up a brand new trend, so no saved configuration on it. We'll go ahead, open up Tag Browser, add a few other tags to it. And so now if I go to Run Browser, and I go ahead and say I want to load config from the database, I can choose between all the saved ones. So I already had a divide in there. You just watched me save the filter one. I go ahead and say, okay, let's use the filter. It loads in my criteria. It loads in all of the other run settings for me. And I can go ahead and say load runs and trend. And we can see here we have our filtered data. There are some gaps at the beginning of the last run, and you can kind of see them elsewhere. So like here's some gaps in the first run. So very quickly, within the matter of minutes, I was able to create, save, and then utilize in another display those run browser settings, making this a very sort of versatile and speedy tool for anyone who needs to do heavy data analysis as part of their day-to-day operations. Alrighty, I have 2 more run browser features for you. So these ones are a little smaller. The first, highlight run in compare mode, and I'll show you that in just a second. And then one of the new things as part of the new runs grid that's been moved into the main tab is you're able to add any ParkView tag to it in order to do further filtering. And I'll explain what that means a little bit more in just a second. So basically, highlight, you'll notice that one of the runs there is a bit thicker than the others, and I went ahead and clicked on another one to make that one the highlighted or thick run. Basically, when you're using compare mode and you have multiple runs in there, you can click on any of those runs in the tag info grid up at the top, and then that will become the highlighted run, and it will get 3 times the thickness. So it makes it really easy to see which run you're looking at, to be able to isolate one over another, to try to figure out which is your problematic run. Maybe the run goes too long, and so you want to figure out the long run, or it has a spike or a dip that you're concerned about. You can go ahead and click through, and that will help you isolate which run you're looking at without necessarily having to utilize other tools. So again, quite speedy. Okay, and then adding tags to the run grid. So by dragging a tag from Tag Browser into the runs grid, what it will do is it's going to add another column to the grid just to the right of your existing columns. This new column will represent the aggregate value of your tag for any given run. So each row will be a run, and the column will be the tag with those new values. You can, of course, add multiple tags to be able to look at multiple statistics. The default aggregate is time average, which is one of our favorites. But you're able to pick from a drop-down a full list of aggregates that are available within ParkView. And then the cool new thing is this new column is sortable. So if you wanted to see the highest or the lowest values, you can click to organize by them, and then the runs will organize by that tag's value or that aggregate value rather than something else like duration or name. So let's take a look at that in action. So I've got my run browser here. I went ahead and I still have my divide criteria from before. And now if I load these runs in here, you see I've got 8 nice runs here. I can go to Tag Browser, find a tag that I like, drag that in, and you'll see it popped open a new run to the right of it. There's a drop-down which has sort of your easy to use or quick aggregates, but you can always click more, and you can see the full extensive list of aggregates we have available. I'm going to choose maximum for this demo, pretending like it's the max speed. And in this case, I want to take my 5 runs that have the highest speed value, regardless of duration. I can select those from the grid and say load selected. And now my trend here is loaded with the runs that I wanted, not based off of time or any other criteria, but based off of which had the highest maximum value for my tag over the duration of that run. So it's another way to be able to get at the runs that you want. So you can mix and merge all of this together. You can filter, you can divide, you can sort by other tags, and put that all together to find, your perfect golden runs or your good silver runs, whatever you want to call them, and be able to use that with ParkView in your day-to-day. So some possible applications for all of this. Kind of the 2 main things that I see is users can set up complex filters to be able to sort of better explore your existing runs. The idea that I had is you might be able to utilize machine speed, machine status, and quality all together to filter out the data that you want to look for your highest and most best data. So using all 3 parameters of OEE, maybe to find your high OEE runs. The other thing that you can utilize is the divide conditions to sort of better focus on the useful segments of your run. So certainly with batch reactors and batches in those reactors, you can cut out the pre and post reaction so that you only care about the reaction part, not loading it up with chemicals or emptying it or cleaning it. And then the other really cool example, or kind of in the batch divide world, is being able to see multiple phases within a single run. So being able to say, okay, I have a phase tag. I want to see when that phase tag is between 2 and 4. And so I get phases 2, 3, and 4 all as a single run. Or possibly saying, show me when the phase tag is 2 and 7. And then I get phase 2 and 7, but I don't get any of the ones in between or outside of that. So again, sort of further slicing and dicing your data to get at exactly what you want in order to make the decisions and the analysis you need to. Alrighty. Thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone for joining. And do you guys have any questions on these new Run Browser features?
Oh, thank you, Adam. That was great. I was glad to be able to see that come to fruition and see some of the demos there. So yes, we do have some questions that have come in. Let me see. I can ask them and you can answer, or we can both try to answer. One was about the quick stats, and kind of whether we're at the quick stats, will they be the overall stats of each run, or are the individual ones, or will be kind of an overall stat of the data?
So quick statistics, when you're using Run Browser, will still have the statistics for each of the individual runs. I would need to check to see if we've added anything about sort of the overall statistics for everything that would be sort of the sum of all the runs that were a part of it. That being said, though, you could certainly kind of fiddle with your different criteria to get all of that in one run and be able to see the statistics for it. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah, and I think with a filter, the statistics within the stats of the filtered data, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So okay. Any filters that you apply, that data is removed from the trend or the display. It's removed from quick stats. Yeah.
Okay. So another question is, when you're done slicing and dicing, can you export to Excel with the filters in place?
Yes. So once you've put together all your stuff in Run Browser using that criteria section, and then you close out and you're in your display and you say export, whether it's the clipboard or to Excel, that will take whatever data is in the display. So all that slicing and dicing that you've done, that will apply to the data that gets exported.
Yeah, because that's the Run Browser can drive tabular and XY and histogram and centerline. So everything that you've showed us in Trend, I could also do that same dividing and filtering in other displays, such as the tabular display.
Yeah, yeah. So all the charts, centerline, yeah, embedded objects and graphics, yeah.
Or question, and I think you covered this one. This is just, you can mix and match, divide and filter criteria, correct?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in my demos, I kind of did one at a time because I wanted to introduce each concept individually. But yes, you can combine those together to be able to even more powerfully kind of get the data that you want, filter out what you don't want, divide on further conditions, all of that, yeah.
Good. I think another question, and I think we touched upon it because we mentioned, but I can kind of answer this one. The question is when you go to other charts, will those filters and et cetera go with them? So like when I launch an XY from the trend, will it bring the filters? And it's always worked that way. If you have Run Browser settings and you launch something, it takes those settings with it. So these get included, correct?
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback on that, that's also part of why we introduced the sort of save and load to database. So yeah, if you're launching a chart directly from Trend, then those will get carried over. But if you do open up a new something and you don't necessarily have it, you can load from the database, assuming you've saved it.
Well, somebody has what they think is a basic question, and I don't think it's too basic because it gets pretty deep. But When making new tags for identifying phases and reaction stages, is it best practice to build a server-side calc tag or a scripted calc tag? In your experience, what works best, or does it really make a difference?
I think if you have the choice, I would go with a server-side calculation, just because anything that run browser, if you do build it as a calc tag that has to be kind of calculated ad hoc, then run browser needs to go through that when it's attempting to do its filtering. And so that could cause, run browser, instead of being instantaneous, like you saw in the demo here, maybe takes a second or two. And anything that takes you out of your process, sip your coffee or read an article on something else, I find that that's disruptive. So I would want it to be a server side just so that I can get the sort of those lightning fast speeds.
Yeah, and a lot of times a phase tag, in my experience, sometimes can be pretty complicated because you're looking at different valves and load sensors and 3 or 4 different criteria to determine whether you change phase. And like you said, the run browser literally is going to have to load all those tags, do that calculation just to come up with your divide criteria. So we always got to remember, even though it looks like it's one tag, it could really be 5 or 6 underneath the covers. So it was asking for the saves when we save the criteria. Is it, when you choose that user, is it just saving for that user and only that user can get to it? Or is it saved to the system for all users and all users can get to it? Kind of what's the purpose of the assigning a user when you save it?
Yeah. So if you save a set of criteria against a specific user, then it is still visible to everyone. But that user becomes the owner for editing purposes, whether it's deleting it outright if you no longer wanted to use it, or possibly changing it, altering it in one way or another. So the full list will be available to everyone, but it's just a matter of whether or not I or someone else will be able to make changes to it.
And for me, one of the exciting things about this new filter criteria and the ability to save it, and for those of you that watched the presentations on some of our development where we talked about themes and tracks, is we want to extend this eventually where you can use this criteria to help you build scheduled or other data export tasks. So let's say you do build a set of filter criteria and divide criteria that fits into data you want to send to another system. That's how we want to extend that. So that's part of the reason we want to have the owner there. So if you build this as your filter divide criteria for data export that might be going to another system, you want to lock it down. You want to make sure nobody goes, oh, I want to add a little criteria to throw out data where temperature is less than 1,000 or less than 500 or something, and then suddenly, boom, the system you're feeding gets a whole new data set. So that's part of the reason that we have the save in there.
Yeah, I think the other reason for the save is just to make sure that there is sort of an official, if I have an official downtime filter for my machine that I've set up as sort of the owner of that process, I wouldn't want somebody else who thinks, oh, well, yeah, like you said, you really do need to include a temperature. I don't consider the process up unless it's running more than 500. And you don't want people kind of fighting. We want to have one sort of official definition for some of these things.
Yeah. No. And then another thing is you only had 2 saved in there, but that the grid it pulled up to pull it back has the filter bar in there, and you can filter on any of those. So again, that's a way to find yours. If you have many people using this, you could have 50, 60, 100 in there. So just another way to find your filters is search for your name.
Yeah.
So the last question is always going to be a tough one. It was what version and when available. And 2 or 3 months ago when we decided this should be one of our presentations, we really hoped it would also be lined up with the release of 7.1. And 7.1 is soon, but it's not today. So that's going to be the release that this additional filtering is available. And we're hoping, and we're in the final testing and some of the beta work. So we really hope that 7.1 is going to be out soon. So it would be the version that we would recommend people to upgrade to, definitely to get this feature. And a couple other things we're going to show in the next 2 days. But most of the stuff we're going to show is either in 7, and a lot of it would still work in 5.6. I think that's all. If any more questions.
Oh, I see one last question, Aaron.
Oh, yeah.
So someone asked, can you do a save as and then adopt to your own usage? So yeah, the answer to that is yes. You could load in any existing one that you don't necessarily have edits on, and then save that with your own permissions or your own edits, and then possibly tweak it if you want to. Maybe you like the official, but for your purposes, you do want to add in a few more things, but you don't want to save it as official, or you can't. You could certainly do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you can leverage somebody else's work without interfering with their work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We do have one more question. It's kind of on converting client-side calcs to server-side calcs. Yes, there's some ways to do it. No, it's not really easy to explain in the little bit of time we have left. But the person that asked that, we do have your name. We'll get a hold of you offline and talk about some of the options there. And maybe that's a good question for a future webinar. What do you do with your client-side calcs when you want to make them server-side calcs? So thank you for that question. Other than that, let me check. Oh, yeah, we had one in the chat asking if you save a trend in a graphic with a particular filter run filter, will it hold that when you open the graphic each time and update with current runs?
So the answer to that is yes. There's a few settings you need to check to make sure that it updates when you open it. So it activates Run Browser when you open it, and to make sure you save it inside of a graphic. But yes, you can do that.
Yeah, I think there's a checkbox like auto load runs on load or something like that. I can't off the top of my head remember where it is, but yeah, there is, and that works for a trend by itself or a trend, because a trend embedded in a graphic really is just a trend. So it should pick up those save settings. Okay, so I think that covers it. I don't see any more questions, so we'll give everybody a break. Right now I have it as 8:43. The next session will start with Nick Iverson at 8:55 Pacific time. I hope everybody can convert to their local times. So please join us back in about 10 minutes, and you get to hear a bit from me again and the Nick Iverson. And you guys are lucky, you'll see Adam tomorrow, where him and I will be flip-flopped in our views. I don't know, we're above and below each other right now. We might be left and right of you. But Adam will be hosting tomorrow, and I'll be presenting, one of the presenters tomorrow. So looking forward to seeing you again, Adam.
You too as well.
Tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.